I recently interacted with a meme, and I'm getting more and more of these. They're from like dumb Facebook groups called things like Men Manifesto. And I interact with these. That's probably why I get some more of them, because the algorithm feeds you stuff that you interact with. I usually interact with them to call them out. This one said something like, not all ruthless men are good men, but all good men are ruthless men. Ruthlessness is the ability to do what is necessary when the situation demands it. Something like that. Um, and then it said, like, so if you're not ruthless, you're just weak. You're just incapable of action. That's not what ruthlessness means. So that's kind of the direction I took when I called it out, and I just said you should probably look up the definition of the word ruthless. I didn't expect to get such aggressive comments my comment, and it was interesting because these comments weren't particularly dumb sounding, to put it ruthlessly. They weren't particularly like uneducated sounding. It sounded like people who had some clue what they were talking about. And that kind of leads me to my first statement here. Something that sounds good and is untrue is a whole lot more dangerous than something that is not true and doesn't even sound good. Because if it doesn't even sound good, you're not very likely to convince anybody that it's true, or you only get a few people jumping on the bandwagon with it. But if it sounds pretty good but it's not true, then you might trick a lot of people, which is a much worse outcome. So ruthless means having no compassion, pity, or empathy for others. That's what it means. Ruthless does not mean having the ability to do what needs to be done when the situation demands it. That's the definition that the meme gave. So that definition is simply not the correct definition of the word. Now, you could stretch it, and this is still incorrect, and I'll explain why, but you could stretch and say ruthlessness is the quality that is needed in order to do what needs to be done when the situation demands it. And that's kind of the direction everybody was taking this. So, okay, I understand, sometimes there's figurative language, and, you don't have to be super literal about everything. It sounded like they were giving a definition. That definition was incorrect. But if you're just saying ruthlessness is the quality that allows you to do this, okay, sure, we're already deviating from what the meme actually said. And I think it's really dangerous to start changing someone or something's words in order to make it make sense, and then defend it on the basis that once you change it, it makes sense. Once you change it, it's no longer what it was. So why are you defending what it was based on what you have changed it to? You might as well just defend your own statement that is different already from what was originally said. But I get giving a little bit of benefit of the doubt and saying, like, well, I think what they meant was, okay, fine. So is ruthlessness required to be able to act and take the actions that are necessary to take when a situation demands it? And people were expounding on this and saying things like, a doctor has to turn off his emotions or her emotions, but of course this was Men Manifesto, so his emotions, in order to do surgery. So therefore he's being ruthless while doing the surgery. He's having no emotions. Well, suddenly we're equating compassion to emotions. Okay, they're related. They're not the same thing. But okay, let's go there. There is a big difference, and here's what I'm going to kind of try to nail down here. This is the core of my statement. There's a big difference between being able to control your emotions and simply having no emotions, or being able to channel your compassion for others and understand what you need to do to actually effectively help them. That's a lot different than having no compassion for others. I don't think that at any point during surgery does the doctor stop being a person who has compassion for others. However, he understands that having compassion in that moment means that he needs to focus 100% on the action that he's doing. and not let emotions or being distracted by his emotions cause him to lose focus on the task at hand. And I do not think that ruthless is the right word to describe that, because ruthless describes someone who has no compassion for others. The doctor at no point stops having compassion for others just because he's doing a surgery. He still has it. He's just not focused on it. He's focused on the task at hand, which is a task that he's likely doing because he has compassion for others, or maybe he just likes the paycheck, but I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. And the same is true for any other kind of situation. There's a reason that we call dictators ruthless and not doctors. Now, there's a bunch of spin-offs that you could take on this discussion. I think it's a pretty interesting discussion, since it, just from a linguistic standpoint, I think that the fact that there's such a strong connotation to the word ruthless because of the way it is used over and over again in literature and in daily talk, maybe gives it more of a relation to violence and meanness and other things than it actually deserves based on just the definition of the word. But we also need to understand that words have both denotations and connotations. That's a real thing. Those are real linguistic concepts. And so the fact that ruthless and the word ruthless is almost always tied to a description of a violent action or a violent person, that does give it a certain connotation, and that is a part of what the word means. And it's not just a connotation. It's not just repeated use of the word to describe certain things that make our minds think of those violent things when we hear the word ruthless. It's actually right in the meaning of the word, because the word means having no compassion for others, right? Having no empathy, having no concern for others, not thinking about the well-being of others, etc. And that mindset, that attitude towards other people causes a person to do violent things, or to do things in a violent way, or to do things in at least the least compassionate way possible. So it's not by accident. It's not that the word has just happened, circumstantially to be used to describe violent things and violent people for so long that we now think of it as a violent word. It's actually, by definition, by extension of its definition, it is a word that inherently leads to violence, leads to violent action, leads to a violent way of doing things. And I think there was one other thing I wanted to say about it, and I can't remember it right now, so I will stop here. Thanks for watching. I found this just to be a super interesting thing, because people had such strong feelings about this. And I didn't really expect that. I thought this was pretty cut and dry. You said ruthless means this. That's not actually what it means. Check your definition. Move on. But people felt really strongly about this. That reminds me of the last thing I wanted to say. Here's why people feel strongly about it, I think. Not everybody is strong enough and disciplined enough, and I'm not saying that I always am either, but just something to think about. Not everybody is strong enough or disciplined enough to control their emotions, and to be able to do what needs to be done while maintaining a compassionate attitude as a person. And I think it's really tempting and probably really appealing to people to be like, yeah, well, actually, ruthlessness is a good thing. Actually, not having concern or compassion for others is a good thing. It allows me to get done what needs to get done. And it's a really good defense for just not having the discipline and not having the ability as a human to do what needs to be done while maintaining a compassionate mindset that might actually make it harder. We can be stronger than that, right? You don't need to throw away compassion in order to do the right things when they need to be done. You can do the hard things while maintaining a compassionate mindset. And I just think it's really tempting for people to just want to throw it out, say, well, that's too hard, but actually I can justify being acting without it. If I can tell myself the story that ruthlessness is actually good, ruthlessness is what allows me to get done what needs to be done. In other words, having a lack of compassion or empathy or feelings for other people allows me to simply do what needs to be done, and that's a good thing. That's a story you can tell yourself and tell other people, and ultimately that's damaging, and it's not true. So I think that's why, and that's also why that meme is so dangerous, is because it's really appealing to something that people want to believe, incorrectly want to believe. And it's manipulating the word, and it's manipulating the use of the word to convince people of something that they kind of are eager to be convinced of, but it's not true, and it will be damaging to be convinced of it. And even the way that the meme was worded, and the way that people were defending it, the best defense that I heard was still people saying somebody needs to be able to act with ruthlessness on occasion when it is called for by the situation. And I would still beg to differ based on my interpretation of the word and the application of the word. I would prefer to use words like act with focus, act with intention, act without being controlled by your emotions. I think there's probably 100 better words, better ways of describing that type of action besides ruthless, and I think ruthless is actually incorrect by definition to use in that application. But I heard people making a strong argument for it, and I got what they're saying, with the intention of saying that you need to be able to cut your emotion or even your feeling level of compassion. You still have compassion. That's my whole contention. You still have compassion as a human being. You're still a compassionate person. You never became a ruthless person. But if that helps you understand, how you act in a certain moment and how you shut off your emotions in a certain moment, and you like to use that word to describe what that looks like or feels like, I think that's fine. But the meme said, all good men are ruthless men. That assigned the characteristic ruthless to the person, not just to how they act at one moment or another moment when it's necessary, but that it made it an adjective to describe the person himself. That as a human being, you are ruthless. That is one of your characteristics, not just how you go about an action from time to time when it's necessary because of a really extreme circumstance, but it's actually a characteristic that you have as a human being. Completely wrong, completely false. And that's why I felt so strongly about it that I kind of called it out and held my ground in making that case, because I think that's a really dangerous thing to let yourself believe. And I think it's maybe not intentionally, but maybe intentionally manipulative on the part of the meme to and I don't know exactly what the motive would be there, but I guess maybe to kind of, the motive's always money, right? Easy sell. Got a bunch of bitter men out there who have been nice a few times and been hurt a few times, and now they're feeling like they just want to shut their emotions off. Let's sell this image. Let's sell this story. Let's sell this way of being. Let's sell our Facebook page that promotes this way of being to those men. They're easy targets. I literally had someone respond to me and say, don't stop being a sheep. Knowing what words mean and being able to read into the potential motive of a Facebook page that is making false claims and trying to get you on board with a false idea, a fake idea, an idea that can't be supported through reality, the actual definition of the words and what it means and what the implications are. Calling that out, that's the exact opposite of being a sheep. I'm not tricked by that meme, by that Facebook page, by that pitch, by that effort to get me to buy in to their philosophy, their Facebook page, their product, if you will. So no, absolutely not. You don't be a sheep. If you're watching this, don't be a sheep. If something sounds a little bit odd, especially in a Facebook post, think about it. Look into it. Look up that word. Consider what it's saying. Really ask yourself. And I think the sell there is that being a more ruthless, meaner person makes you not a sheep. Being mean is not what makes you not a sheep. The way that term has been used for a long time, a sheep is someone who's gullible, who goes along with things. Not necessarily nice things, not mean things per se, just anything. So, yeah, don't be a sheep. Don't go along with stuff just because it sounds good, just because it appeals to something, just because it sounds right on the surface. So anyways, thanks for watching this, and catch you later.